The hall was shining with gold and glass. 100 lights from the crystal chandeliers rained down on the polished marble floor. The air smelled of perfume, money, and power. Cameras stood ready on tall metal arms. Billionaires sat in soft leather chairs, waiting. World leaders whispered to each other. Everyone had come to listen to the Saudi tycoon who owned half the oil, half the steel, and almost every headline of the day. The tycoon walked slowly to the center of the stage. He wore a white robe that glowed under the lights, and his eyes were sharp like steel. His voice was deep and heavy, and when he spoke, even the air seemed to pause. He said, "I have built towers taller than mountains. I have made fortunes larger than nations. I have bought men who were said to be not for sale. But now I ask you, what is the one thing that even I cannot buy?" A silence rolled across the room. The cameras zoomed in, waiting for someone to answer. The rich men and women shifted in their seats, but no one spoke. Some looked down at the tables, pretending to think. Others smiled nervously, afraid of saying the wrong word. The tycoon's question had cut deeper than they expected. The tycoon lifted his chin and looked at them all. "Well," he asked. His voice was calm, but there was a storm behind it. He was testing them, measuring the power of their minds, not their wallets. One politician cleared his throat, but no sound came out. A businessman tapped his fingers on the table but stayed silent. The silence grew heavier, filling the hall like a storm cloud. The tycoon's question was not only a puzzle, it was a mirror. And no one dared to look inside it. Then, from the far side of the hall, came a sound no one expected. It was not a prince. It was not a minister. It was not a billionaire. It was a voice calm, steady, and deep. A voice that carried no perfume of wealth, no shine of fame. The voice said, "You cannot buy respect." Heads turned at once. Every eye in the hall snapped toward the sound. There, at the back, standing beside a bucket and mop, was the black janitor. He wore a plain blue uniform stained with soap and sweat. His hands were rough from years of work. His face was calm, almost too calm, as if he did not care who was watching him. The hall froze. For a moment, it felt like the world itself had stopped. The janitor had answered the question that the powerful men feared. He had said it with no doubt, no shame. Only truth. The tycoon's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in surprise. His lips curved into the faintest smile. He stepped forward on the stage and pointed with his hand. "You," he said. His voice rolled across the room like thunder. "Come here." The janitor did not move at first. He looked around at the staring eyes, at the shocked faces. Many of the guests looked offended. How could a janitor, a simple worker, dare to speak in a hall made for kings? Yet the tycoon's finger did not drop, and his eyes did not leave him. Slowly, the janitor put down the mop, wiped his hands on his uniform, and began to walk forward. Every step echoed in the silence. The rich whispered behind their hands. The cameras turned, capturing every movement. The janitor's shoes squeaked on the marble, but his back was straight, his eyes steady. He walked like a man who had nothing to lose. He reached the stage and stopped at the foot of the stairs. The tycoon looked down at him. The difference between them was like earth and sky, one draped in white gold, the other in workman's cloth. Yet in that moment, the janitor's words still hung in the air, heavier than all the riches in the room. The tycoon asked again, his voice softer now, "Why do you say that?" The janitor lifted his head. His eyes did not shake. His voice was clear. "Because respect cannot be forced, and it cannot be traded. A man can fear you. A man can envy you. A man can obey you. But respect," he paused, and the silence was so sharp that even the cameras seemed to lean closer. "Respect is earned. And if you lose it, no money will bring it back." The words cut through the hall like a blade. Some billionaires shifted uncomfortably. Some leaders frowned. But deep inside, every person knew the truth in those words. The janitor had spoken something they all tried to forget. The tycoon's eyes shone with a strange light. He laughed, a short, sharp laugh that bounced against the golden walls. "Out of all the men here," he said, "only you had the courage to answer me. A janitor among kings." The hall erupted with whispers. Some thought it was a joke. Others thought it was an insult. But the Tycoon's face was serious. He leaned forward, looking straight into the janitor's eyes. "Tell me your name." "David," the janitor said simply. "David," the Tycoon repeated, rolling the word in his mouth as if it carried a taste he had not known before. "A name of kings. And yet you clean the floors of mine." David did not flinch. A floor must still be clean, no matter how high the tower rises. A gasp moved through the room. The answer was plain, but in its plainness, it carried a weight the wealthy could not match. The Tycoon stepped down from the stage, and now he stood face to face with the janitor. Their eyes locked. For a moment, the hall disappeared. There was no camera, no crowd, no fortune, only two men staring at each other across the thin line of truth. The Tycoon placed his hand on David's shoulder. "You remind me," he said softly, "of something I forgot long ago." But before he could continue, a voice from the crowd broke the silence. It was sharp, mocking. "This is nonsense. Are we to be lectured by a cleaner? By a man who smells of soap and dust? This is an insult to us all." The crowd stirred, torn between shock and anger. But David did not move. He did not look at the man who insulted him. His eyes stayed on the Tycoon, calm and steady. And in that moment, it was not the rich man's insult that filled the hall, it was the janitor's silence, heavy and powerful. The Tycoon raised his hand, and the noise died. His voice, low and dangerous, swept across the room. "Enough. Do you not see? This man has spoken more truth in 1 minute than you have spoken in your lives." The hall went silent again. The cameras kept rolling. And the world outside, watching on screens, felt something stirring deep inside their hearts. The night had begun with gold, power, and pride. But it was ending with a janitor's words echoing through marble walls. And in that silence, everyone understood something had shifted forever. The hall had turned into stone. A moment before, it had been a place of laughter, pride, and quiet competition among the rich and powerful. But now every eye was fixed on one man, David, the janitor. His blue uniform looked out of place among silk suits and golden watches, yet his words had cut deeper than any diamond in the room. "Respect cannot be bought." Those words hung like fire in the air, and no one could put them out. The Saudi Tycoon stood beside him, his hand still resting on David's shoulder. The crowd did not know what to think. Some stared in disbelief, others with hidden anger. A few even looked afraid. It was not the janitor's simple truth that scared them, it was the way the Tycoon listened to it. For the first time, the man who controlled their wealth, who shaped their markets, was giving his attention to someone they had never noticed before. And that changed everything. The cameras whirred quietly, their lenses locked on David. Around the world, millions were watching the scene unfold on live broadcast. Social feeds lit up with questions. Who is he? Why is the Tycoon listening to a janitor? The world was not seeing another deal, another speech, another empty promise of power. They were seeing something raw, something real. And they could not look away. The Tycoon's voice returned, low but sharp. "David," he said, "you have spoken a truth that none of these men and women dared to speak. Why is that?" David looked up at him. His eyes were calm, steady, unshaken by the bright lights and the sea of rich faces. "Because I have nothing to lose," he said simply. When a man has nothing to lose, he has no reason to lie. The words struck like thunder. Many in the hall shifted uncomfortably. Their wealth, their fame, their titles, they were shields, but also chains. They could not speak truth without fear of losing something. The janitor had no such chains. That was his freedom, and they could feel it. The Tycoon slowly stepped back, letting David stand fully in the light. "You say you have nothing to lose," he said. "But tonight, you may have much to gain." Gasps rose in the hall. The idea itself was shocking. Was the Tycoon truly giving space, even honor, to a janitor? The thought rattled the walls of pride that the powerful had built around themselves. One voice broke through the whispers. A tall man in a silver suit, a tech billionaire from the West, leaned forward with a cold smile. "This is amusing," he said loudly. The great Tycoon, entertained by a floor cleaner. "Shall we also ask the cook to give us lessons in philosophy?" Laughter rippled in small pockets of the room, forced and nervous. The billionaire smirked, proud of his insult. But David did not flinch. He turned his head slowly, meeting the man's eyes. His voice was steady. "If you ever went hungry," David said, "you would know the cook has more wisdom than you think." The laughter died at once. The insult was turned into a mirror, and in that mirror the billionaire saw his own emptiness. He opened his mouth to reply, but no sound came. He leaned back in his chair, his smile gone. The Tycoon's lips curved into a faint grin. He raised his voice for all to hear. "Do you see? Truth is not tied to wealth. Wisdom is not tied to titles. This man has reminded us of something we have all forgotten." The eyes of the hall turned again, this time toward the Tycoon. Some looked with fear. Was he serious? Some looked with anger. How could he lower himself to stand beside a janitor? And yet others looked with awe, because they could sense something powerful was unfolding, something bigger than gold or contracts. David stood still, silent, his hands at his sides. He did not chase the spotlight, and he did not fear it. He looked like a man standing in his own small truth, and that made the light shine even brighter on him. The Tycoon raised his hand, calling for quiet. His voice echoed through the hall. "I asked a question tonight. What is the one thing I cannot buy?" None of you answered. You all had fear in your hearts. But this man, whose job is to clean after you, whose face you do not even remember, spoke the truth without fear. He turned toward David again. "From this moment, you are not invisible. From this moment, you will stand with me." The shock was complete. The billionaires whispered furiously, the politicians muttered to each other. The media captured every second, the flashes lighting up like fireflies in the Golden Hall. Around the world, people watching felt their hearts race. It was as if history had shifted by a single, unexpected voice. But not everyone was ready to accept it. A prince from the royal family rose to his feet, his eyes burning with anger. His voice was sharp as a knife. "This is madness. A hall of kings should not bow to a servant. Tycoon, you shame us all by lifting dirt to the level of diamonds." The hall gasped. It was open defiance. For a moment, tension cut through the room like a blade. But David did not speak. He stood still, his silence louder than the prince's insult. And when he finally lifted his head, his words came slow, calm, unshaken. "Diamonds are born from dirt," he said. The prince froze. The hall fell into silence again. The words were simple, but their weight was crushing. The insult had been turned into truth, and the truth was undeniable. The Tycoon looked around the hall, his voice rising like a storm. "Enough! I have heard your titles, your numbers, your empty boasts. But tonight, I have heard something greater. This man has no crown, no fortune, yet his words strike deeper than all of yours combined. That is why all eyes turn to him. And that is why you cannot look away." And it was true. No matter how much they resisted, no matter how much pride burned in their hearts, every eye in that hall was locked on David. The janitor. The man they had never seen, never cared to know. He had become the center, not by force, not by wealth, but by truth. The cameras zoomed closer, filling screens around the world with his face. And millions of people watching felt something stir in their chests, a mix of hope, fear, and wonder. Because if a janitor could shake the halls of the mighty, then maybe truth still had a place in the world. The night was not over. The storm was only beginning. But already, the balance of power had shifted. The eyes of the rich, the eyes of the poor, the eyes of the world had all turned. And they were not turning back. David stood in the light of the Golden Hall, but his mind was far away. The cameras flashed, the whispers of billionaires filled the air, and yet inside him, memories were moving like shadows from another world. For the first time, the world was looking at him, but he had spent a lifetime being unseen. He remembered nights in a broken neighborhood where the streetlights were dead and the sounds of sirens never stopped. He remembered the face of his mother, tired and worn, working 2 jobs just to feed her children. He remembered the heavy silence of a father who had walked out when David was only 10, leaving nothing behind but an empty chair at the dinner table. In school, he was invisible. No one wanted to sit next to the boy with second-hand clothes and shoes that squeaked with holes. Teachers passed him by. Friends never stayed. He was the child who cleaned chalkboards after class just to feel useful. While others dreamed of cars, wealth, and future, David dreamed of something simpler, one day where he could walk into a room and not be ignored. The Tycoon's question had dragged all those memories out of him. Respect. That was the word that had lived in his heart all his life, the word that had haunted him in silence. He knew what it felt like to live without it. He had been poor, he had been overlooked, he had been pushed aside. And yet, he had learned one thing: respect could not be demanded. It could only be earned. Now, as he stood under the golden lights, he realized the strange truth. All his years of cleaning floors, of working in silence, had been preparing him for this very moment. The world was finally listening, not because of his uniform, not because of his position, but because of the truth he carried in his heart. The Tycoon, still standing close, noticed the distant look in David's eyes. He leaned slightly and asked, just loud enough for the hall to hear, "Tell me, David, where did you learn such words?" David blinked slowly, his gaze turning from the past back to the present. His voice was calm, but his tone carried the weight of years. "I learned them in silence. I learned them when no one listened. I learned them when I was a child watching my mother cry at night because the bills were higher than her pay. I learned them when I swept the floors of schools where no one even looked at my face. I learned them by living at the bottom, where you see people as they truly are." The hall was silent. Not a cough, not a shuffle of feet, not a whisper broke the stillness. The richest people in the world, men and women who controlled nations and industries, sat frozen as the janitor spoke. And around the world, millions watched on their screens, feeling something in his words that no billionaire speech had ever given them: honesty. A woman from the front row, draped in diamonds, leaned forward. Her eyes were sharp, but her voice was curious. "And do you hate us for it?" she asked. "Do you hate those of us who were born into comfort, who never knew that pain?" David turned his head slowly toward her. His eyes did not carry hate. They carried something far heavier: truth. "No," he said softly. "I don't hate you. Hate is heavy, and I've carried enough weight in my life. But I do pity you. Because many of you will never know what it feels like to earn something with your own hands. You will never know the taste of bread bought with sweat, the joy of a roof fixed with your own tools, the meaning of a single dollar when it is the only dollar you have. You have treasures, but you have lost touch with their meaning. That is a greater poverty than mine." The woman sat back slowly, her diamonds suddenly feeling colder against her skin. Around her, others looked down, as if their wealth had been turned into mirrors reflecting their emptiness. The Tycoon's eyes glimmered with something strange: respect. He nodded once, deeply, as if David's words had struck him personally. For years, he had surrounded himself with men who praised him, who fed his pride with shallow words. But in one evening, a janitor had spoken to him like no one else had dared. But not all in the hall were moved. A man in a dark blue suit, a politician with power over millions, leaned forward with a mocking smile. His voice dripped with scorn. "So, we are to be guided by a man who scrubs toilets? Is that your message? That wisdom hides in dirt?" The insult drew a few nervous laughs, but they quickly died when David looked at him. David's eyes did not flash with anger. They were calm, like a quiet sea hiding storms beneath. He spoke slowly. "Yes," he said. "Because dirt is where seeds grow. You eat from the ground you despise. You breathe air cleaned by trees born in soil. You walk on earth that was dirt before it was stone. If you think wisdom cannot live in dirt, then you know nothing of life." The hall froze again. The politician's smile vanished, replaced by a pale face. The cameras caught everything, and the world outside erupted with noise, tweets, posts, and messages exploding across the internet. The janitor speaks truth. The janitor humbles the mighty. David lowered his eyes for a moment, breathing quietly. Memories stirred again, long nights working 2 jobs, cleaning floors while studying in dim light, losing friends to gangs, watching neighbors vanish into prisons. He had seen life at its rawest. That was why his words had weight. They were not polished speeches. They were lived truths. The Tycoon finally spoke again, his voice firm. "David," he said, "the world has spent years listening to the rich, the powerful, the proud. Tonight, they will listen to you. Tell them, what is the greatest lesson your life has given you?" David's breath slowed. He lifted his head and looked around the hall, at the eyes fixed on him, at the cameras carrying his face to millions. His voice came low, but clear. That a man is not measured by what he holds in his hand, but by what he carries in his heart. Wealth can vanish. Power can fall. But a man's heart, his kindness, his honesty, his respect, that is what lives after him. That is what no one can buy or steal. The words rolled like thunder, and yet they fell like soft rain on the hearts of those who listened. Some bowed their heads, ashamed. Others looked shaken, as if something deep had been awakened inside them. And the Tycoon, the man who once believed he could buy everything, stood still, silent, his eyes filled with thoughts no one could read. In that hall of gold, where power was worshipped and money ruled, the shadows of David's past had become his strength. The poor child, the invisible student, the forgotten worker, he was all of them still. But he was also something greater now. His scars had turned into weapons, his silence into thunder. And as the cameras captured his every word, the world began to understand. This janitor was not just answering a question. He was rewriting the meaning of power itself. The Golden Hall had turned into a battlefield, not of swords or guns, but of words and pride. David, the janitor, stood in the middle, calm and steady, while the Saudi tycoon watched him with eyes that burned like hidden fire. The rich and powerful shifted in their chairs. Some were shaken, some were angry, and some were simply afraid. The air was heavy with tension, as if the walls themselves were waiting to hear what would happen next. The silence broke with a sharp voice. A European banker, his suit lined with silk, slammed his palm on the table. "This is absurd," he barked. "We came here to discuss empires, investments, and nations. And instead, we are forced to listen to the speeches of a floor sweeper. This is not wisdom. This is humiliation." His words rang across the room, and for a moment, the crowd stirred with uneasy approval. Heads nodded, whispers grew louder. Many of them were thinking the same thing but had been too careful to say it aloud. Now the banker had spoken for them. David did not raise his voice. He did not step forward. He simply turned his head toward the banker, his eyes calm and deep. "A man's seat does not make his words heavy," he said. "Truth is not born in golden chairs. It is born in the soul. You sit high above the world, but if you cannot speak truth, then you sit on air." The banker's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His face flushed red, his pride cracked. He looked down quickly, unable to meet David's steady gaze. The hall buzzed louder now. Some looked impressed, others furious. But the storm had only begun. From the front row, a woman in a glittering crown rose slowly. She was a royal from the West, her family name known in every newspaper. Her voice was sharp, and her words dripped with arrogance. "You speak well for a janitor," she said, "but do not forget your place. Men like you clean after us. Men like you exist to serve. Do not mistake a kind word from the Tycoon as an invitation to stand equal with those born to rule." The hall waited for David's reply. The insult was deep, and the weight of her crown gave it power. But David only breathed slowly and lifted his eyes. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "A crown does not make a head wise. A title does not make a heart pure. You may be served by many hands, but if you believe you were born to rule, then you are blind. No one is born to rule. We are all born the same. Naked, crying, and powerless. What you become after that, that is what decides your worth. The royal froze. The hall gasped. Her jewels sparkled, but in that moment, they looked like chains around her neck. She sat down slowly, her eyes lowered, unable to match the weight of his words. The Tycoon's lips curved into a smile. His deep voice thundered through the hall. "Do you see?" he said. "This man speaks truth that none of you dare to touch. You call yourselves rulers, leaders, kings. But what use are kings if a janitor's words carry more power than yours?" That was the breaking point. Rage lit up in the crowd. A man in military uniform, decorated with stars and medals, shot to his feet. His fist slammed the table, rattling the glasses. "Enough," he roared. "You insult us by comparing us to this nobody. We have fought wars, commanded armies, built nations. And this worker, this cleaner of dirt, dares to stand above us?" The hall echoed with his fury. His medals glittered under the lights, symbols of battles won, lives commanded. He looked down at David with pure contempt. "Men like you follow orders. Men like me give them. Remember your place, or you will be crushed under the boots of men greater than you." The hall buzzed with tension, half the guests nodding in agreement, half frozen in silence. Cameras zoomed closer, the world outside watching as the clash reached its peak. David finally stepped forward. His steps were slow, steady, his face calm as stone. He stood just a few feet away from the general and looked into his burning eyes. His voice came low, but it carried across the entire room. "You may command armies. You may crush nations. But you cannot command respect. You cannot order a man to honor you. You cannot buy the love of those who bury their dead after your wars. You may wear medals, but medals do not cover blood. Respect is not in the stars on your chest, it is in the hearts of those who follow you. And if their hearts are empty, then your stars are nothing but metal." The general froze. His face went pale. His hand trembled on the table, and for the first time, he could not reply. The hall was silent again, the words striking deeper than any bullet. The Tycoon stepped forward, his robe flowing like a storm cloud. His voice thundered. "Do you hear him? Do you see? You call yourselves the powerful, but your power is built on fear, on money, on force. His power is built on truth. That is why you cannot defeat him. That is why you cannot silence him." But the elites were not ready to surrender. Anger burned in their eyes. The banker, the royal, the general, they looked at each other, united not by loyalty but by wounded pride. Slowly, others began to rise, their voices a storm of protests. "This is madness," one shouted. "He is a nobody," cried another. "Do not let him poison us with his cheap words," yelled a third. The hall shook with fury. The clash of voices grew louder, anger filling the golden room like fire. But in the middle of that storm, David stood still, his silence stronger than their noise. He did not raise his voice. He did not fight their fury with fury. He simply stood, calm, unbroken, like a rock in a raging river. The cameras captured it all. Around the world, people watched with wide eyes. They saw the rich and powerful scream like children, while the janitor stood in silence. And they felt something they had not felt in a long time: hope. Finally, the Tycoon raised his hand, and the room fell quiet. His voice was sharp as a blade. "You fear him," he said. "You call him weak, but your anger proves otherwise. You fear him because he shows you a mirror. And in that mirror, you see what you have lost. Respect. Honor. Truth. You see the dirt you tried to hide. That is why you rage. Because you cannot silence the truth he carries." The elite sat back, some with rage, some with shame, but none with words left to answer. The clash was over, but the war of pride had only begun. And in the middle of it all, David stood quietly, his heart heavy with the memories of the past and the weight of the present. He had not come to fight. He had not come to rise. Yet here he was, standing in the Hall of Kings, shaking the world with nothing but truth. The storm of power had clashed against him, and still, he stood. The Golden Hall was quieter now, but the silence was not calm. It was the silence of a storm holding its breath. The clash of voices, the insults, the rage of the powerful, all of it had been silenced by David's calm words and the Tycoon's thundering defense. But something deeper was about to happen, something no one in that hall had ever imagined. The Saudi Tycoon stood tall on the stage, his eyes scanning the room. His voice rolled out like a wave, strong and heavy. "You came here tonight expecting numbers, deals, and promises. But I tell you now, money is dust, and titles are smoke. Tonight, I see clearly what I had forgotten. And tonight, I will make a choice that will shake you all." The crowd stirred nervously. The words carried weight, like the sound of a gate opening to a place they did not understand. The Tycoon's face was carved with determination, and his voice carried no hesitation. He turned slowly and looked at David, the janitor who stood by his side. "For years, I have built an empire larger than nations. I have looked at kings and seen them bow. I have counted my wealth until the numbers lost meaning. But what is an empire without truth? What is a tower without a foundation? I tell you now, I will entrust the future of what I have built to the one who reminds me of truth." The hall erupted into chaos. Gasps, cries, shouts. Some shouted impossible. Others cried madness. Chairs scraped as men and women rose to their feet, their faces twisted with shock. The cameras zoomed in, catching every expression, every word. Around the world, viewers leaned closer to their screens, unable to believe what they were hearing. The Tycoon, the man known for crushing rivals and owning half the planet's wealth, was speaking of giving his empire not to a prince, not to a general, not to a billionaire, but to a janitor. David's eyes widened slightly. He had not expected this. He had spoken only what he believed, nothing more. He had not come seeking crowns or fortunes. He had come to work, to clean floors as he always had. Yet here he was, being placed at the center of a storm bigger than himself. From the crowd, the general who had shouted earlier leapt to his feet again. His face was red, his fist shaking. "This is madness," he roared. "You would hand power, real power, to a man with no rank, no training, no history of command? You dishonor us all." The Tycoon's eyes turned to him, sharp as a blade. "I dishonor no one," he said. "I honor truth. Tell me, General, if I gave you my empire, would you rule with respect, or with fear?" The general opened his mouth, but no words came. He lowered his eyes, his pride burned into silence. Then the banker rose, his voice cold and sharp. "This is a trick. A show for cameras. You will not do this. You cannot risk what we have built on a janitor's shoulders." The Tycoon stepped forward, his robe flowing, his hand pointing like thunder. "You built nothing. You sat in your towers and counted numbers while others suffered. Do not speak to me of risk. I risked everything when I built my empire from sand and sweat. And now, I choose to risk it again on truth." The hall grew louder, voices clashing like storms. Some pleaded with him to stop. Others demanded he reconsider. A few sat in stunned silence, unable to believe what was unfolding before their eyes. Through it all, David stood still, his heart pounding but his face calm. He had never imagined this moment, never dreamed of such words being spoken about him. But as he looked at the furious faces of the powerful, at the Tycoon's burning eyes, at the flashing cameras capturing it all, he felt the weight of choice pressing on him too. Finally, he spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the chaos. "I did not ask for this. I am only a man who cleans your halls. I do not want crowns, or empires, or the weight of billions on my back." The hall quieted slightly, leaning in to hear his words. The Tycoon looked at him, unblinking. David continued, his tone steady. "But I know this. An empire is nothing without respect. A leader is nothing if his people cannot look at him with honor. You can build towers of steel, but if they are not built on trust, they will fall. You can hold gold in your hands, but if your heart is empty, your gold will not save you. If you want me to carry this, I will carry it only as a reminder. Not everything has a price. Not everything can be bought." The hall froze again. His words struck like lightning, simple yet unstoppable. The tycoon stepped closer, his voice lowering but stronger than ever. That is why you must. Because only a man who does not want the crown is worthy to wear it. Only a man who knows the weight of respect can remind the world what true power means. The crowd broke again into fury. The prince who had spoken earlier rose to his feet, his voice sharp with rage. You cannot do this. A janitor cannot inherit what was built by kings. You will destroy everything. David turned his eyes toward the prince. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Then maybe it deserves to be destroyed if it cannot survive without lies. If your power is so weak that it fears a man with nothing, then it is not power. It is fear wearing a crown. The prince's face twisted, but he had no answer. The hall shook with noise, yet David's words carried above it all. The tycoon lifted his hand, and the room slowly fell quiet once more. His voice thundered like a final judgment. I have made my choice. This man, who was invisible to you, who had no name in your halls, will stand beside me. Whether you accept it or not, the world is watching. And they have already chosen. The cameras turned, zooming on David's face. Millions around the world saw not a janitor, not a cleaner, but a man standing against the storm of pride and power. Social feeds exploded, voices rising across nations. Respect cannot be bought. The janitor speaks truth. A new kind of leader is born. David lowered his head slightly, breathing deep. He had not wanted this, but fate had placed it on his shoulders. He was not afraid, not of the tycoon, not of the crowd, not of the empire. His life had been filled with silence, with shadows, with being unseen. But now, the world's eyes were on him. And for the first time, he understood something powerful. Sometimes the greatest choice is not made by the powerful. Sometimes it is made by the one who was never supposed to have a voice. The tycoon's final words rang through the hall, heavy and unshakable. Tonight, I give you not wealth, not gold, not towers. I give you a truth you cannot silence. This is my choice. This is the future. And the hall, filled with kings and queens, billionaires and generals, sat stunned in silence. The clash was over. The choice had been made. The Golden Hall had become a battlefield of silence. The arguments, the shouts, the fury of the elite, all of it had been burned away by the tycoon's thunderous declaration. Now, only stillness remained, heavy and thick, like the air before a storm. The cameras were still rolling, their red lights blinking, capturing history in motion. Around the world, billions sat frozen in their homes, their offices, their streets, watching a moment they knew would never be forgotten. David stood at the center of it all, a man in plain clothes, a man whose hands still carried the smell of soap and dust. Once invisible, now all eyes were on him. He could feel the weight of 1,000 stares pressing against his chest, the stares of kings, princes, bankers, soldiers, and strangers across the globe. He had not asked for this stage. He had not wanted this crown. Yet fate had dragged him into the light, and now the question hung in the air: what would he say? The Saudi tycoon's gaze was steady, his voice soft but filled with fire. The world is listening. Say the word they cannot ignore. The silence stretched like a blade across the hall. David took a slow breath. His heart pounded, but his voice, when it came, was calm and strong. I am not your king. I am not your prince. I am not the weight of gold you wish to worship. I am only a man. But maybe that is enough. The hall stirred, the words sinking like stones into deep water. He continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. All my life, I have cleaned your floors, emptied your bins, polished your glass so that you could see yourselves in it. I was invisible to you, nothing more than the shadow at your feet. But tonight, you look at me, not because I became rich, not because I wear silk, but because I spoke truth. And that is what you fear most, truth. Gasps rippled through the hall. The cameras caught faces frozen in shock, others trembling with anger, others with awe. David stepped forward, closer to the crowd, his eyes sweeping across their stunned faces. You speak of power, of wealth, of legacies. But I tell you this: power without respect is nothing. Wealth without honor is empty. And legacies built on lies will fall faster than sand through your fingers. The general who had raged earlier shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The prince lowered his eyes. The banker clenched his fists but said nothing. David's voice softened, but its strength only grew. Do you want to know the real truth? It is not kings or empires that hold the world together. It is the unseen. The cleaners. The builders. The hands that carry water, the backs that carry weight. You do not see them, but they are the pillars beneath your towers. You ignore them, but they are the reason your empires still stand. I am only one of them. And tonight, I speak for all of them. The hall was utterly still now. The words had become chains around the throats of the mighty, holding them in silence. David's eyes turned to the cameras, his voice directed now not only to the room but to the billions watching beyond it. If you see me tonight, do not see a janitor, do not see a poor man lifted up by chance. See the truth, that respect cannot be bought. That dignity does not wear crowns. That every man, every woman, no matter how unseen, carries the same worth as a king. The words hit like thunder across the world. On screens everywhere, ordinary people felt tears rise to their eyes. In factories, in crowded buses, in lonely apartments, workers and dreamers and forgotten souls sat straighter, their hearts pounding with pride. The Tycoon's lips curled into a rare smile. His eyes glistened, though he did not blink. He knew, in that moment, that history had changed forever. David's voice lowered now, almost to a whisper, yet every soul in the hall leaned forward to catch the words. Do not fear me. I am not here to take what is yours. I am here to remind you what was always ours: respect, humanity, truth. You lost it chasing gold, but tonight, you will remember it. He stopped, his chest rising with the weight of what he had spoken. The hall held its breath. Then, after a heartbeat that seemed to last forever, he spoke one last line. His final word. Look at me, and never again say that the unseen have no voice. The hall erupted. Some shouted in anger, some in awe, some in tears. The cameras flashed like lightning. The roar of the crowd was carried out of the Golden Tower, into the streets, into the airwaves, across oceans. Around the world, the words spread like fire. The janitor spoke. The janitor spoke truth. The unseen have a voice. David bowed his head, stepping back, his work clothes still simple, his shoes still worn. He had not changed, and yet the world around him had. The Tycoon placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice booming one last time. Tonight, the world has been shocked awake. Not by wealth, not by power, but by truth. And truth came from the one you never saw. The cameras caught it all, the Tycoon standing beside the janitor, two men from different worlds, united in a single moment of clarity. And as the broadcast ended, billions of people sat in silence, tears in their eyes, fire in their hearts. For the first time in history, the world understood, sometimes the greatest power belongs not to kings, but to the unseen. The story of the Saudi tycoon and the black janitor would echo for generations. Not as a tale of wealth, but as a reminder that no voice is too small to shake the earth. And in that hall, as the final echoes of David's words faded, everyone knew the truth. The unseen had spoken. And the world would never be the same again.